I offer my pranams to Thakurma and Swamiji, my pranams to the revered monks of the order, my namaskars to everybody who's present here today. It is incredible to be talking about Indian ethos in modern management. And as I continue the conversation, I should candidly confess that I am the difference between you and your lunchtime. And I understand that can be challenging on both ends. But as we try and discuss about management, I want to stick to the basics a little bit. I've been asked to talk about youth leadership or this in the context of young people of this country as well. And it is expected that I speak in English. I speak simple English. Is that fine with everybody? But especially with everybody, some people are watching it in the hall, many people are watching it on live stream. I'll get to the conversation right away. It is a national seminar on Indian ethos for modern management. It is important that even before we start the conversation, we look at what management is in general. Because I know many young people in this country grow up dreaming to be powerful, rich, important, and influential. And they relate it in the first place to an important job, or being an industrialist, being a CEO, or being a general manager. Now, when you look at it in general, management or a management position is not just about power. And there's a second part. Do I still have everybody's attention? I had a feeling something happened in the middle and everybody's attention went away. Okay, thank you. So there's one part, one section of young people in the country who want to be managers. And there's a second group of young people who despise business, who do not want to be managers, who grew up with the idea that business is unethical, managers are not necessarily good people, and it is important that we try and make sense of why management at all. And especially as young people who have walked into management colleges, hoping to get a degree, people who are industry leaders, people who are management professionals. Management is needed in the first place in this world because hundreds of years ago, and even thousands, many of us want to look for role models all across this world. I have this great privilege of working with middle school and high school children all across this country. And when they want to find a role model, and they often ask me, who should be my role model? The first role model I suggest to them is usually somebody who we learn about as the least advanced of all humans, the early men and women. We are taught that the early men did not know anything. They could barely fetch for themselves. They did not have our snazzy mobile phones or new technologies. But if, as young citizens of this country, as future leaders or present managers, if we want to make sense of why we exist, the early man tells us an important story. And that story is that we all know the story of fire and how it took man forward. But many of us forget that the first generation of early men who saw fire, they had many options. They could have run away from it. They could have just kept on walking. They could have just avoided the truth that there was a fire in the forest. But the early men chose to do something that I hope all of you, as young leaders and managers, would do. The early man paused. Let's begin to pause. That's the first part. Something happens in our immediate society. Something happens in the country. Something happens in the classroom or in our schools or colleges. Let's begin to pause. Let's take notice. That's the first lesson right there. But the early man did not just stop, did not just begin with pausing and left it there. The early man thought about fire. And a few minutes, and probably that great generation of men and women, they found that this fire keeps me warm. And that means 6 months later, when winter comes, or several months later when winter comes, this fire can keep us warm. That was the utility that early man could see. The early man also saw that there were many animals who would usually attack the early men and women who were running away from fire. And it told them that this fire can protect us from these animals. When the fire was gone and they saw that these vegetables and fruits that were left in this fire, they tasted better once they were cooked in fire. If you look at it, these three utilities, and there's more that man found. These utilities that fire can keep us warm, it can feed us good food, it can keep us protected. The early man could have patented this. The early man could have just kept it to himself. But they spread this message as far as they could. They passed it on to next generations so that they could use it the best. And if you really try and summarize all of it, the early man had not gone to any school or university, had not started a private limited company, or got listed on an important magazine. But the early man realized the duty of being alive. And that was that the basic things that we must do: pause, reflect, think. These are basic things. Schools and universities may or may not teach us that. But if we do not choose to learn, we are fundamentally devoiding ourselves of every other privilege that we hope to enjoy. But the second part is the early men saw the utility of something that was happening. They passed it on to next generations, people living in different areas. And due to that, the next generation could build on that existing knowledge. There was probably a generation, we don't know which one, that learned how to make fire. There was a generation that came up and postulated theories of heat energy. There were some that made a train run using steam engines. Some made an airplane fly using that same concept of energy and heat. And if you look at it, we are today in a hall where my voice is being amplified, the temperature is being controlled. Everything that we are doing right now. Now this small history, and I have watered it down to the simplest level possible, tells us something. And it should make us question, why do we go to school? And why do we go to college? Why do we live in a country or a society at one point? It is largely to make sense of what is available, use it for the greater benefit of mankind, and take it forward and pass it on in a better, more advanced version so that more people can benefit. And if you want to sum up this message, something that Swami Vivekananda incredibly did when he founded this great organization, the twin organizations of Ramakrishna Mutt and Mission. He said, and he quoted the Rig Veda there, Atmano mokshartham jagathitaicha, for the salvation of self and the service of mankind. Largely, those of us who grow as young people hoping to become rich and popular and influential and thus enter management, we are reading it wrong. And those of us who think that business is unethical and management is something that is too bossy, that these corporations are there to enslave people, we are reading it wrong as well. Management exists so that we make lives better inside our homes, in our immediate communities, in our countries, and largely across this world. There was a generation of people who thought that just going from one place to the other on a bullock cart or on horses was not good enough. That is the reason why a generation of managers like Henry Ford gave us cars that move us from one place to the other. There was a generation that decided that we can make technology better, that emails can be written, that video calls can be made possible. But all these people who are managing something, remember they were managing change. We do not see the food that we consume as a part of social change. We do not see the telecommunication that we make as a part of social transformation. We do not see computers and newspapers and printing presses as things that have evolved humans to the larger infinite possibilities that humans always came with. But remember, these possibilities will not be manifested if we do not manifest ourselves. The patriot monk, one of the greatest of all times, said that education is the manifestation of perfection already in man. It is that perfection that is manifested when somebody's education in computers also enables that person to build softwares that would run the world moving forward. And that is the reason why Bill Gates is a billionaire, not because he decided that he wants to make a lot of money. The first myth about management, that if we have to be popular or rich or influential or in control of a lot of wealth or a lot of authority, we need to become managers, you will not get there if you want to do that. Many of us, and there's a startup boom in the country. A lot of young people want to become entrepreneurs. We get started thinking that entrepreneurship is a few days of struggle and then a Ferrari that you can drive around. No, the Ferrari does not come in based on a calendar schedule or based on a paycheck to paycheck schedule. That 3 years of struggle and then you'll be driving a Ferrari. Many of us also get inspired by people like Steve Jobs and Mark Zuckerberg. That, they used to wear the same clothes every day. And we forget something very fundamental. That sages and monks, rishis and gurus in this part of the world wore the same clothes day after day. Same kind of habits and behaviors. But we choose to conveniently forget that. Because management seems to be something that has to come from outside. And I know as we discuss Indian ethos for modern management today, many of us will do a lot of West blaming. Many of us will do a lot of blaming outside that, too much of Western influence is coming in. We live in a country that has a national motto that comes from the Mundaka Upanishad, Satyameva Jayate. We live in a country where our IIMs, the best institutes for management, derive their motto from the Bhagavad Gita, Yoga Karmashu Kaushalam. We live in a country that is protected in the seas by an Indian Navy that before they jump in, they say, Shano Varuna. We celebrated the strikes in Balakot, and we forgot that those young men and women who put themselves in the line of fire as leaders, as managers, as administrators, as protectors, they say, Nabha Sparsha Diptam, when they go to protect our skies. See, one of the points I wanted to make was that it is not that Indian ethos have disappeared somewhere, or they have not been offered to you, that they have been taken off from books or they have been turned off for you. It is about what we fundamentally choose. What makes us us? Is it the presence of a friend that makes me me? Is it the presence of a Pakistan that makes me more Indian? Is it the presence of other religions that makes me more religious or more spiritual? Is it the presence of bad examples of management that makes me a good manager? Or there is something more fundamental, that as humans, we are potentially divine, as Swami Vivekananda put it. That as managers, we carry a solemn responsibility to move the world forward with new inventions and innovations, with better services and better products, with more information at ease. And it is a fundamental choice that we'll make, that we do not need a negative polar opposite in order to be that fundamental good that we can be. We can be good students in the absence of bad students. We can be good citizens in the absence of bad citizens. We can be good managers in the absence of those bad ideas of management. Because what we criticize, that is not management. And this is something as young people in our schools and colleges, we will need to choose. We will need to take a call on. Swami Vivekananda used to say something incredible. He used to say that the coming glory of this country will be so great that our ancient glory will fade. And some skeptics can question how. There's another Swami Vivekananda quote that is just incredible and that is specially made for you and me and everybody in this country, where he said that my workers will come from the younger generation, the modern generation. They will work out these problems like lions. The first line that he would say, to quote this, would be, my faith lies in the younger generation, the modern generation. Out of them will come my workers, they'll work out these problems like lions. If you look at the continuation of that can be that education is the manifestation of perfection already in humans. And then there is something incredible that Swami Vivekananda says. And these are, of course, separate quotes that I'm bringing in for you so that you can make sense of it. Where he says, renunciation and service are the national ideals of this country. No matter what kind of manager you want to become in this country, we are in the state of Gujarat that told the rest of the world that we can lead from the front. In the 1940s, around 1948, a young dairy technologist in this country returned after an education in the United States of America. And he came to a place here in Gujarat called Anand. India at that point was a milk deficient country. Farmers in this country were struggling. And yet this great man, under the mentorship of another great leader, Tribhuvan Das Patel, set out with a billion-liter idea to transform this country from a milk-deficient country. And remember, in 50 years' time, in 1998, this country overtook the very same country V.I.V.E.C Kurian had left and returned to become the largest producer of milk in the world. It happened a few hundred kilometers from here. But there's something incredible about that Amul story. That Amul did not just start with V.I.V.E.C Kurian or Tribhuvan Das Patel. Farmers in this part of the country went to a gentleman by the name of Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel and they said, we are not being treated fairly. And Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, with great truth, he told them that, you know what, if I get involved in your movement, the British government will think that this is something political, this is something related to India's independence movement, so they will crush you. So you will have to organize yourselves. You will have to lead yourselves and manage yourselves. Why do you not come up with a model that I can further support? And he instructed the local leadership at that point to find somebody, let the farmers organize themselves and find somebody who can lead. In the meeting of the local Congress in those days, a young gentleman by the name of Morarji Desai, who would go on to be the Prime Minister of this country one day, he asked, who are the people who are interested in being the chairman of this cooperative? Turns out most people raised their hands. Another gentleman, this person did not even raise his hands. And this is documented. This person did not raise his hand and he was asked, why do you not want to be the chairman? He said, I do not want to be the chairman of a cooperative. They said, this is exactly the kind of person we need. And that is how Tribhuvan Das Patel was given the leadership responsibility to lead what was Kaira Milk Producers Union in those days and became Amul after that. When you look at the story of a V.I.V.E.C Kurian, he worked with 9 Indian prime ministers. And yet the most expensive possession that a Kurian had was a watch that his grandson had gifted him. But it does not limit itself to Kurian. A great gentleman in this country at the age of 30, and I often like to quote him, Rameshwaram is a holy city in this country. In fact, Swami Vivekananda had spoken in Pamban when he'd come. Rameshwaram is connected to mainland India by only one bridge, and it's called the Pamban Bridge. When cyclone hit this country in 1963, 1964, Pamban Bridge came falling down, and I want to cut short that story as much as I can, but I hope you take the essence home. When Pamban Bridge came falling down, this country assigned the responsibility to fix it to a 30-year-old civil engineer and gave him 180 days to do it. Matter of national importance, questions were raised in the Indian Parliament again and again, by when will we fix Pamban Bridge? On the 45th day in this country, the Parliament of India, when the question was raised, the parliamentarian said, within 1 month we will fix it, without even understanding the complex challenges this 30-year-old civil engineer had asked his gurus about. This civil engineer asked his seniors, his gurus, how quickly can we fix it? Most people laughed and said that no, nothing can happen. This cannot be fixed in 180 days. To the great surprise of people in this country, on the 45th day when the parliament of this country was answering that we'll need 1 more month, next day in the newspaper the headlines was that a young man, this young 30-year-old civil engineer, had fixed Pamban Bridge in 46 days instead of 180. But the most incredible thing is that that work ethic, that management style, that leadership, he would carry it forward to build the most challenging railway project in global history, the Konkan Railways, and what is India's pride and the world's envy, Delhi Metro. The young 30-year-old engineer whose first task was to fix Rameshwaram with Pamban Bridge, connect Rameshwaram to mainland India through that person was E. Sridharan. And when a book was written on his life, it was not called The Civil Engineer. It was not called The Metro Man. It was not called E. Sridharan. It was called The Karma Yogi. And that is something incredible we need to know and learn. That Indian ethos had never disappeared. That even when a Bill Gates or a Mark Zuckerberg or a Steve Jobs, when they take forward that lifestyle, when they take forward the idea of purpose-driven economies, purpose-driven companies, serving till the last mile, these are very basic Indian ideas. But just like we choose to ignore that motto that comes from the Mundaka Upanishad, Satyamev Jayate, we choose to ignore the lessons that are already there in this country. Nobody else can come back and teach us that. We would have been fortunate if we were born in Japan and we tried and look across the world and tried and learn from India. That would have been easier. When you are a badminton player and you want to learn cricket, it is easier. You'll go to a cricket player and learn from him. But when you are a cricket player who has stopped learning, a badminton player cannot help you. And that is what India's forte in management and also India's challenges in management must remind us. As young students of BBA and MBA, as young people who aspire to lift this country up through various tenets of management, right from home to community to city to country, remember, Japan cannot come to us and teach us the Bhagavad Gita. Germany cannot come us and introduce us to the Mundaka Upanishad. Bill Gates cannot always remind us to learn from a Sridharan or a Kurian or a Kalam or a Sarabhai. We need to know that the father of the space program in this country played the founding role in building Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad. And then we have been taught to be just focus on one thing. When you are in high school, you want to focus only on engineering coaching. When you are in college, you want to focus only on one trade and one job. The father of the space program in this country founded India's greatest management programs, Vikram Sarabhai. So there is a very simple thing for all of us to reflect on. And that simple thing is, are we fundamentally questioning ourselves that what is our responsibility in whatever role that we have? Are we fundamentally asking ourselves what makes us more patriotic? The presence of another country or the love for our own? What makes us more religious or spiritual? The exhibition of somebody else's spirituality or religion, or the love for our own or the longing for our own? What makes us a better student or a better son or a daughter? The presence of a bad example or something you want to compare with, or the fundamental essence that we are potentially divine, and it is our responsibility to manifest that divinity within. And remember, everything that we do, whether we fly in the air, or we take a car or a train, these are all the manifestations of those immense possibilities that lie within humans. Something that Swami Vivekananda often said, that the mission was to preach unto mankind their potential divinity and enable them to manifest it. So, a BBA course book, an MBA degree may or may not make you a manager. But that fundamental journey of Chintan and Bodh, that journey of reflection, continuous reflection on every single bit of things that we do and hope to accomplish, and that continuous realization ranging from self to our pursuits, only that can take us forward. So I do not want to take much of your time. I have around 4 minutes left. I want to largely leave with a story that you are more likely to remember. In the United States of America, when they decided to put a man on the moon, considered one of the greater achievements of mankind, science and management and whatnot, there is something that we all must remember. John F. Kennedy was on way to Rice University to deliver an address when he was briefed by scientists that there is a slight possibility we might put a man on the moon within a decade. This science-loving, education-loving, nation-loving president could have used a political platform to announce that. But he chose a university as a place from where America announced to the world that in this decade we'll put a man on the moon. But President Kennedy did not just stop there. He decided to go and visit the space facilities, NASA's facilities, where this project was being pursued. He met with the scientists and mathematicians and engineers and managers and administrators, and he would ask each one of them, what are you working on? Somebody said, I'm looking at the trajectory, I'm looking at the escape velocity, I'm looking at ignition, I'm looking at program management. And he ended up meeting this young man who shook hands with him, who was a janitor, who was a sweeper, a cleaning staff. And President Kennedy asked him, what are you doing? He said, I am putting a man on the moon. And President Kennedy was surprised. So he asked him, how are you putting a man on the moon? He said, you see, sir, this entire space that I clean, this has been assigned to me. This is my responsibility to keep this entire place clean. If I do not do this, one machine or one technological equipment that finds this dust and begins to malfunction, and we'll not be able to put man on the moon. So my job is to keep this place clean. And as long as I'm keeping this place clean, I'm helping mankind put a man on the moon. Remember, that is the fundamental idea of ownership. That is the fundamental idea of management. That is the fundamental idea that calls upon us to redefine words like management and keep the purest of it alive. Redefine words like authority and power and keep the most fundamental, most divine of those ideas alive. Yes, we have people in in positions of authority, but we have a term for that. They're called Raj Rishis in this culture. And they are not bad people, they're incredible examples for mankind. We need to know in terms when we want to become powerful that in this very country, in this very civilization, we called an army of 5 brothers stronger than an army of hundreds of people just because Dharma was on their side, just because Bhagwan was on their side. We need to know that in this country where we try and look for countries that can better facilitate everything, it is a Maryada Purushottam Ram who goes to this place called Lanka, which was made of gold, and says to Lakshman that Janani Janbhumischa Swargadapi Kariyasi. In this country, we never defined power or might or influence by those ideas that were superficial. Gold never defined what was a more prosperous place, Ayodhya or Lanka. Numbers or quantity or workforce or military might never defined who were stronger, the Pandavas or the Kauravas. And just like that, in the present world order, the size of an economy, the strength of a military, the political dominance of a country will not alone decide which country shall lead the world. It is the character of the people of that country. And that is something that Swami Vivekananda continued to talk about again and again. So if India wants to lift more people out of poverty, bring better education to more people, bring better healthcare to more people, yes, we need more managers. And yes, we need greater management. That is the reason why we send you to school. And that is the reason why we send you to college. But the hope is that you do not come out with a degree hoping to get a paycheck. The hope is that you will know that you lead an education company so that every child in this country can learn better. You run a chain of hospitals so that this country is healthy and hearty in every single sense. So that is the reason why this country needs management. And if this country has to be lifted up, and if humanity has to be lifted up, that management needs to come from those fundamental Indian ethos that are ours. And we do not need a polar opposite to stoke what is ours. It needs to be the love for what is always ours that manifests within us. Let that divinity manifest. Let it go from technology offices of this country to infrastructure offices, from real estate to real education. Wherever you want to go, let that divinity manifest. Let that perfection manifest. Let your education and service and leadership and management be the one that Swami Vivekananda preached unto mankind and one that will lead us in the future for thousands of years. Jai Hind, Jai Bharat.